All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Retail War Zone. Tonight is an actual very special evening. We have the esteemed honor of Senator Jeff Brandes from Florida joining us tonight. We've got 30 minutes of his time. We're going to hit the ground running. No introductions or whatnot needed. And Senator Brandes, if you'd go ahead and give us just a little bit of backstory on you, how long you've been in it, and as I understand, this is your last term, correct?
It's my 12th year in the Florida legislature. I served 2 years in the Florida House. I've done 10 years in the Florida Senate. I am ready to be termed out. Some people complain about term limits. I have 4 small kids, so I'm excited about it. So I can go home and watch the kiddos. Most of them have never known me outside this process, so they know that their dad disappears off the face of the earth 120 days out of the year. So let me tell you, I was born and raised in Florida. I grew up going to a small Christian school where my mom was headmaster. I joined the Army 7 days after high school, mostly away from her. I spent 11 years in the military. After I got back from home from the military, I thought I'd come back and work for my family business, which they promptly sold. And I joined the legislature in 2010 in the Florida House, spent 2 years of a tour of duty in the Florida House, then moved over to the Florida Senate, have spent 10 years in the Florida Senate, have been reelected in 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18, and just finishing up my last tour of duty in the Florida Senate, and worked predominantly on all things from self-driving cars, property insurance, and criminal justice reform are probably the 3 things I'm most known for working on. But I like to tackle tough problems. I would describe myself as a Republican with a little R and a Libertarian with a capital L.
Gotcha. Awesome.
That's me.
So if you, I just want to make real quick, Irish, you still with us?
Yes, all good.
All right, cool. So, Senator, if you would not mind, go ahead and kind of give us the rundown of the proposal that you have for the training wage. And firstly, I do want to apologize because I think when the Twitter conversation happened, I think everybody was really gearing on the 425, but according to things I've read, you're expecting it to be around 10. Is that correct?
I don't. So I mean, it'll be somewhere around 10. It's hard to know exactly because the way my bill sets it up is it says that it has to be set basically by a study that the legislature does. So here's the argument, right? The argument essentially is as the minimum wage rises, there are people that are going to be winners. Absolutely. But there's people that are going to lose too. And who are the people that are going to lose? Well, the people that are going to lose are the people with low skills or no skills that are unlikely to get a job and will basically be discriminated against by their applications being put at the bottom of the pile. Who are these? Well, these are typically groups that have very, higher than normal unemployment rates. Groups with 2, 3, 4 times the national unemployment rate. Now, this conversation obviously is better when it was better in 2020 when we had COVID and the unemployment rates were through the roof than they are today when unemployment rates are very, very low. I think the statewide unemployment rate in Florida is in the 3 to 4% mark. But, we're basically at full employment today. So the real question is like, how do we help the people that ultimately potentially lose on this end? And there's a lot of research on this stuff, and a lot of economists have opined on this. And there's just broad consensus that there's going to be winners, and there's a lot of people that are going to win by a $15 an hour minimum wage. But I think it's honest to say that there are people who are going to lose out. And those are generally, as we described in our Twitter feed, the hard to hire. The people that are teens that are just starting out in the workforce, they have no skills. Like they're 16, 17 years old, 18 years old, and they've just never worked before. Or the people with low skills that are maybe have done one job but basically not really worked. And then you have the other groups that are like, my passion is for felons and trying to get them reintroduced to society and getting them working again. So you have these groups that have multiple times the state unemployment rate. Felons often have 25 to 30% unemployment if they're recently incarcerated. And so how do we mitigate and provide a pathway for them to find employment? So the temporary training wage, which is again offered in 30 states, and the federal government offers a temporary training wage, is really designed to encourage them to enter the workforce and encourage employers to hire them and bring them on, because my whole goal is get them engaged, get them employed, and then get them into a, at least a minimum wage, if not more, job. The beauty of a training wage is that it's completely voluntary. It's voluntary for the employer to offer it. It's involuntary for the employee to accept it. If they can find a better job, go with peace, find a better job. We want you to do that. That's like, it's, basic economics. You got the freedom of where you want to go. And frankly, the marketplace decides. But if you can't find a better job and somebody offers you a temporary training wage job, well, now you have a pathway to a better life. And so we're essentially, the goal here is for those who need it, we add an extra rung to the ladder of success by saying that first rung for some is just too far. And so how do we add this extra rung and allow people the opportunity to step on that and then get into a regular wage job?
Awesome.
So that's basically the crux of a temporary training wage.
All right. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, all right, as you've said, it's voluntary, for those seeking employment, but also employers as well. However, one could assume that there would be no need for this legislation unless some businesses are backing your proposal. Having said that, are you able to share what businesses or business sectors have shown support?
Well, I think a variety of business sectors have shown support. I mean, I've talked to restaurant and lodging association groups that have shown support. But the beauty for me is I'm termed out. I'm not running again. I'm not raising money to run again. I'm done with the legislative process. And so the pureness of my heart here is, how do I help people with no skills, low skills, get engaged and get employed? For example, felons, we know that the two leading factors for felons to re-enter society and to be successful when they re-enter society is, what kind of family are they going back to? And do they have a job? If they're going back to a family that's in chaos and they have no job, the likelihood that they're going to commit new crimes is very high. I can't control the family, but I can potentially help them find a job. The challenge in Florida is, of my 80,000 inmates in the state of Florida, 40,000 of them can't read past the 6th grade level.
Wow.
And so we have to find ways for people who can't read past the 6th grade level to find employment in this marketplace. And the bulk of the research shows that employers just are unwilling to hire recently released felons and those with no skills or low skills.
Excellent. Irish, you have a question?
I think that some of what you said there, I kind of instinctively agree with. What I'd like to know is that you're trying to create an incentive for people to enter the workforce, correct?
Okay, that's correct.
But in a sense, in a way, they are paying for that. Would it not be more appropriate, for example, to offer some sort of a tax deductible incentive to a business, and perhaps you could have even say tied that to a business that turns over less than $500,000 to keep it local, make sure that big multinationals don't take advantage of it. My instinctive, I think you can understand the optics of this is not great. Because most of us here listening to this would have started at a minimum wage, which would have been the de facto training wage. But it would have been more palatable, I believe, if people were not essentially charged for their own training.
Well, again, people aren't really charged for their own training. Here's the thing. The other option for them is to remain unemployed. That is, if they can't find another job, they're going to be unemployed. And so what we're trying to do is create a pathway to a minimum wage job plus. And we're trying to offer an incentive not to the employee, because the employee has the incentive to look for work. We have to offer an incentive to the employer that's simple, that's scalable, and that doesn't require a boatload of government paperwork. Because in the states that offer those types of incentives, like income tax exemption or other tax exemptions, businesses just don't do it. I mean, you can look around the country and there's multiple states that have some type of incentive like that. But for the most part, most businesses don't do it. They don't engage their employees. Even under the temporary training wage, I think you would see a vast majority, like 95% of businesses, just not want to deal with it. And so you're only talking about a small percentage of businesses that are looking to hire teens, recently incarcerated, and those with low or no skills. And so what we're trying to do here is just create a pathway for those groups. It's not for those people who have trained, they've been working for 10 years and they're going to change jobs and they're going to move to a new job and they get a temporary training wage. First of all, most people, like, nobody would take that job. They wouldn't take it. They would say, listen, my time is worth more than that. I'm going to move into a profession that's going to pay me appropriately. Nobody swings from one vine to without knowing usually where the other vine is. And so the goal here is to get people who have never been on the vine, like this is their first time, to get something they can grip onto, and then they can start swinging. So at the end of the day, my goal here is, how do we incentivize people how do we incentivize companies to hire people they otherwise just simply would not consider? They would put their application at the bottom of the pile. When you're looking at a stack of 10 applications and other people have work experience, and somebody comes in and they're, I got out of jail or I got out of prison 2 years ago or 6 months ago or 3 months ago, or I'm 16 years old and I've never had a job before. You go, look, I'm going to put that on the bottom pile and I'm going to look for somebody who's more experienced, versus companies that are proactively looking for those individuals so they can help train them and grow them into productive members. It lowers the risk for those companies to do that.
Piggybacking off of that, we had a question come through the chat. If they're a felon, then does your bill affect how they're treated if they check that box saying, yes, they've been convicted?
No, the bill doesn't affect how they're treated. So there's people out there who are like, ban the box, and I understand that, and I understand that philosophy. If it worked, it might be something I could consider. The simple truth is, in vast majority of circumstances, it doesn't work. People simply discriminate. They discriminate because within a Google search, I can do a background check on pretty much anybody. I can find out whether you've been incarcerated before. Virtually every business that I know of does some type of simple background check, and your felony is going to pop, or your misdemeanor offense is going to pop pretty darn quickly. And so how do we, I would much rather have companies that have a proactive stance of looking at people and saying, listen, we're actually looking for people who have a former criminal record and we're willing to hire them. And that's whether that's their civic duty or they feel like that's just their public good that they're doing. I don't care. But how do we encourage and incentivize employers to hire them? In Florida, that looks like liability protection. It could be other benefits that company receives. One of the benefits could be you can offer a temporary training wage and incentivize people to come work for you, and then basically do a trial run with that person. When somebody gets out of prison, you don't know what you're getting. And it's a risk for an employer to bring that person on. So if I can do a trial run with you for a few weeks or a month or 3 months, then it may be worth for me to bring you on and pay you a higher wage in the future.
That does make sense. My question would be, though, when it comes to, former incarcerated and ex-felons and such, is there any kind of like behind the scenes talk or some sort of framework being, worked upon to ensure that these individuals, they make it past the 6 months and they retain their employment?
Well, look, I don't think employers are looking to churn employees. I really don't. I mean, there may be some other different perspectives out there saying these businesses don't care. But every business I've ever been involved in, for the most part, it takes time, energy, and effort. And if you get a good employee, you want to retain them. You know the value of that employee. And so the last thing you want to do is bring somebody to the 6 month mark, cut them free, and then have to start back over, not knowing whether that person's going to show up for work, not knowing what their family situation is, if they're going to be taking time off in the first 20 days. You want to know the value of that employee. And so how do we incentivize businesses to at scale, which is the big problem? How do we incentivize businesses at scale to bring in employees that they otherwise simply wouldn't consider? And in Florida, we don't have an income tax, so you can't offer an income tax break. We have a business tax, but if you've got to go through a lot of paperwork to bring one employee on or 5 employees on, you're just going to not do it. Especially if you're a large business, or even if you're a small business, because you don't want to screw up the forms and then be fined for it. So what ends up happening is they don't bring them on. They don't participate in the program.
Gotcha. Irish?
Yeah, I think you touched on something there, Jeff. In my experience, I've hired a lot of what you would call hard to hires. The biggest problem is actually the company most of the time. It's the HR departments and things. So I think there was an opportunity here, because you do come across as genuine, in particular with felons, that you do want them to actually better themselves when they come out. That if it was more localized in their own communities, I do think something along the lines of the, going down the route that you could have done this in some sort of a tax way, but it just, in terms of the minimum wage, is frankly not great anyway. Like, inflation, sir, with respect, has completely obliterated the last time that the minimum wage, so to offer somebody a training wage, for example, at the training wage, let's just say $10 an hour, roughly speaking. If they work full time, which is about 40 hours, $400 a week, let's say there's no deductions. I mean, that's $1,600 a month. I mean, sir, the rent in your own town is likely to be higher than that. So
it is absolutely.
In all fairness, what I'm saying to you is that the incentive, when I began my working career, and I'm in it a while, not quite as long as Steve, but one week's wages used to cover my rent, sir. Right. So the problem I'm putting to you is the market. The market's screwed. And more should be done from a governmental point of view to try and regulate things like that. And I know you don't like regulation in general, and I don't either. I think it interferes with the market. But at the same time, the problem is far, far greater than a simple project like you're trying to do. And I do think you're genuine. I think what you're trying to do, get felons, reintroduced to society, be productive. Absolutely, I'm behind that. But they're entering a market that's screwed, completely screwed.
Yeah, listen, if there's better ideas out there, I'm open to them. And I've always been open to them. In Florida, the reentry process is $50 in a bus pass. Mm-hmm. How long do you think you can stay out there for $50 in a bus pass? That's why they're living under bridges within 48 hours, because they've blown through their money. And now they've got no family to go back to because they've been incarcerated for 20 years, and now your family's all gone or moved on, and you got no place to go. And what do you do? So if I can get you in a halfway house for 30, 60, 90 days, and I can get you a temporary training wage, and I can get you started on a job, that's a start. Look, they're just, it's government. There aren't perfect solutions to these problems. There's no panacea to reentering people into society. You do the best you can, and you try to figure out programs that work at scale, that are simple, and that businesses may participate in. But tax credits around the country on these types of issues do not work, not at scale. Mm-hmm. They may work for one business that's large enough to go through the paperwork and everything else like that. But mom and pop businesses aren't going to file paperwork with the governor to hire somebody for $3 or $4 extra an hour, less an hour. They just aren't going to do it. So how do you find these programs that work at scale? This is why 30 states do this. This is why the federal government allows it. And that's the key, is like, it works in other states. Now, some states are getting away from it, and I think that's largely political. And it's largely because the economy has shifted so much that politically it doesn't make sense potentially for them to have a training wage on their books. But it doesn't mean it's bad policy going forward. It doesn't mean that it will not work in the future if the market changes and we go back to higher unemployment rates for groups like teens and recently released felons. We have to find solutions that work at scale. And this is one of them.
Awesome. Okay, so another question from our chat, and this really kind of is the crux of where a lot of us sit, and I mirror Irish's sentiment. You are absolutely 100% sincere in what you're trying to do, and it's a great thing, actually, trying to get people that do not have much of a chance to give them one. But one of the questions was, they asked if you had ever worked for or closely with customer service employers, because the general feeling amongst them is that most employers would 100% find a way to abuse this. Now, I know you had said there's no incentive for them to do so. So kind of putting this together, is there any kind of agency or regulation or anything just to protect these employees, to make sure that you don't have companies that are just turning and burning for the sake of a lower payroll?
Yeah. So listen, if you've ever been in the business in Florida, we have our trial attorneys. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen the billboard from John Morgan that size matters and all this other stuff of the trial attorney world. If you get let go in Florida, there's about a 50-50 shot that the employer is going to get sued. And the litigation rules the roost here in Florida. And so I can tell you, in my businesses, when we let people go, we get sued all the time for things that are totally frivolous, that we've written them up, we've done all this stuff right, and we still get litigated against. And so really, there's an entire market out there of people circling to sue businesses if they start churning employees or they're not following the law to the letter of how employees should be treated. But most businesses have no desire, again, to hire new employees every 30, 60, 90 days. It just isn't worth the time, energy, and effort to save $3 or $4 an hour. You'd rather have somebody that you know is going to show up, that you know is going to do a good job, that you know there's going to put their heart into this thing, that cares about the company, that cares about the people that they work with. That's the kind of employee that I beg for every day. Versus somebody who's going to show up, you may not show up at all, or is going to call in sick 4 days a week, and you can't depend on. So can I say no business is ever going to do this? No, I can't. Can I say most businesses aren't? Yeah, I can say that. And I can also tell you that, frankly, I'm okay with that, because my goal is to help those who are recently incarcerated and those who have no skills or low skills find employment. And if the worst thing that happens is they get let go, they have now 3 or 4 or 5 months of work experience that they can put on their resume and go to their next employer and get a better job.
In regards to going to like another job or whatnot, so is this a one and done when you enter this? Let's say you finish the 6 months training, and let's say you get a better opportunity, or let's just say something happens, maybe the business goes under or whatnot, and you go to apply somewhere else. Do you go back into that 6 months if they choose so, or are you done?
No, I mean, it's really, again, it's up to the employee. If you go from one job to another, now you've got 6 months of work experience, and you hopefully left on potentially left on decent terms with your previous employer, but you move on to the next job and they hire you again. Let's say 5% of businesses are offering some type of training wage, which means 95% of businesses are hiring at the minimum wage or greater. What are the chances of you going to one of those other 5% businesses? Not great. A vast majority of you are going to go into the 95% of the businesses that are offering a training wage or better. And so most people aren't going to swing from a training wage job to another training wage job. 99% of people aren't going to find themselves in that situation. Is somebody? Sure. But there's a reason they're taking another training wage job if there are other options available.
Right. One of the biggest concern for most of us that are watching right now is the fear of abuse. And like you said, are some people going to do it? Yes. Would most of them? Probably not. You are probably correct there. But let's look at like low income businesses. We'll use, for example, Dollar Tree. Okay. They recently had to jack their prices up to $1.25 because of inflation and supply demands and whatnot. I can tell you from being a store manager for Dollar Tree for several years, they hire their cashiers in at the lowest rate possible. Okay. So typically in like a Dollar Tree environment, say your district has 10 stores, you're going to have the number one performing financial store. You're going to have the worst store, which is number 10. What's to stop a company like that that's already operating on razor thin margins to take that lowest volume store and all of a sudden it became a training location with the sole purpose of saving payroll dollars to protect their profit margins? That's kind of what we're looking at as far as, abuse, because it will happen. And I would say you're pretty much correct that most companies themselves would not do that, but it comes down to the culture of these companies and the message gets lost, down the pipe. And then you've got regionals and district managers mandating to their store managers that they have to do this. And what we're just looking for is some kind of stopgap measure to ensure that does not take place.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I mean, you're not going to stock an employee with a business that has $1 million worth of inventory. Even Dollar Tree has got $180,000 worth of inventory in there with some junior with somebody who's got no experience and is on a temporary training wage job day after day after day after day after day, because you'd have more money walking out the back door than you had walking out the front door through shrinkage. You have to, businesses care about the people that are watching the shop. And that's why they add value. It's not just like you're the cashier, you're also the cashier and the security guard.
Well, to your point, specifically speaking of Dollar Tree, that is the case. They do operate in a way that would not be, I guess you would say, ethically correct for them to adopt this measure. And when you're a store manager for 30 years or whatnot, you become complicit in these things that we think are going to happen because the order has come down from upon high to exploit people for less money. And this is factual.
Let's say store 10 has a store manager and their job is to hire the temporary training wage employees. And then at the end of the 6 months, they let the temporary training wage employee go. And that temporary training wage employee goes to store number 2 and takes the job there and says, hey, I got 6 months of experience at store number 10.
Well, that is a possibility.
Is that employee
they do have
right? Is that employee worse off? No, they're actually better off because now they're getting a better wage and they've got 6 months or 3 months of experience at store number 10.
Perhaps, but in the meantime, they've been exploited.
Well, no. In the meantime, they've been trained.
No, they've been exploited because they're doing the same job for a different wage.
No, because if they could have gotten a job at store number 2 for a higher wage, why didn't they take it?
Correct. Now, the one thing that you hit on right there, as far as the training goes. Okay, so as we've discussed, most of these states that have this, it's a 90-day window. Okay. And that's from date of hire. That's consecutive calendar days. It's not 90 working days.
Sure.
So you're proposing 6 months, and I'm just curious as to why, and if there's some sort of data that supports that's the move, because that's where
legislative 101 is you always ask for more than what you ultimately want. And so when I go into committee and I get complaints, and they say, well, why isn't it 30 days or 60 days or 90 days? And I say, okay, well, if it makes it 90 days, would you support it then? And they go, yeah. I go, great. Let's make it 90
that makes sense.
And I'll do it right here.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. I mean, there is a little bit of poker to the game of legislation. And what you ultimately want is, so you put in the that you can match the federal wage at $4.25. Do I actually want that? No. I actually don't, because I'm not going to get it, but I build it in so I can pull it out.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Now, but who's going to be the deciding factor on what the wage is going to be? Do you know?
So we do a study every 3 years to determine what the wage should be for the temporary training wage. What's going to impact unemployment of these hard to hire groups? Is it going to be $10 an hour and the minimum wage is $15? Because even if my bill goes into law, even if it passes constitutional muster and gets into the Constitution, it won't go into effect until 2023 at the earliest, like, or potentially January of 2024. So we got a lot of time before this would actually take place. And in Florida, the minimum wage would be $14-15 by then.
Right. Because you're slated to hit 15 in 2026, correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. Senator, I know you said you had 30 minutes. We've ran over. I do not want to take up any more of your time. If you've got something you need to do, it's totally up to you. If you need to jet, that is perfectly fine.
I do. I got a place to be at 9, but I really appreciate you guys the opportunity to come on. I listened to last week's episode. I really appreciate the candidness and the conversation tonight. I really do. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you understand my intent is. And if you look at my legislative history and the things that I've done in the past and my advocacy for criminal justice reform, my goal here is to actually solve a real problem, which is my belief that when you raise the minimum wage, there are winners, and unfortunately, there are people that get left out and lose out. And how do I mitigate that harm? And 30 states and the feds try to mitigate that harm by allowing employers to offer a temporary training wage. My goal is to simply model what those other states are doing. Is it going to pass? It's probably unlikely that it's going to pass this year, but it's my last year, and I'm just trying to put my best ideas forward to help the state of Florida. Thank you all for
Thank you so much, sir, and enjoy your post-government life here soon.
I look forward to it. My kids do.
All right. Thank you so much, Senator. All right, everybody. So that's where we're at. What's everybody think? Irish?
Well, I do think that he is sincere in what he's trying to do. In particular, he spoke very passionately about the criminal justice system. He's got some very good points in terms of the challenges that they do face coming out of that system. I do, however, disagree that they should be essentially, kind of exploited and charged for the privilege of being trained. And the same would go for the kind of other hard to hires, the teens. I do think that, though, the problem really does lie in the nature of this podcast in retail. Because I know for a fact, I didn't want to really get into an argument with him, but no more than what you said about Dollar Tree. I've worked for places that, they would exploit that in 1 second. No problem.
I'll be honest with you. It took a lot to keep my composure. I don't know if the screen color showed my face getting red, but hey, look, let's be real honest here. He admitted.
But he may not be privy to that, though.
Yeah, but he admitted here on the stream. Would some businesses do that? Yes. So there's your
policy.
Yeah, there's your answer. All right. So now we know. All right. So he's not going into this blind. He's fully aware that businesses can and will exploit this. And I will also back up what I said. I think there are some companies out there where your CEOs have great intentions. But, as the Fuck Today would know and Maiden and whatnot, the message gets lost as it comes down the pike, and you've got DMs and RVPs with different plans. And those are the ones who are really going to push, this exploitation, because that's cheap labor, period. Blame time, I do agree with you. I think he does mean well recently, for the incarcerated. I know, he's had a hand in some criminal justice reform there. I do believe, he did make a point to talk about putting them in halfway houses, and that kind of alleviates some of the burden of cost because they have somewhere they can go. But if he sticks to his word and 6 months is just so he can pull it back, I don't see any way how 6 months would pass anyway, because the rest of the country, the other 30 states that do this, it's 90 days. And, convicted felon or not, the one comment I've made, I was telling Irish, we're in a situation where the labor market's so bad that it's a buyer's market to go get employment, and you're going to have businesses that are desperate to hire people, they're going to take a chance on ex-felons and pay them better than what the training wage is going to be, because they're just hurting for people, and
Yeah.
but it's there again, blame tag. I think you would agree with this. The underlying theme never changed. Something's better than nothing, right? So, but that was interesting, and the guys, I want to appreciate everybody, for coming out. I didn't know how long he was going to be on. I knew that we had to start late because of it, and when we came on, before we came live, he said, "I've got 30 minutes," and hey, look, I've got no problem with that, because he didn't have to do this. And the one thing I will say about him is, obviously he's passionate about what he's trying to do with, especially the formerly incarcerated, because he's willing to come on like this little podcast to get his message out. And I do have to give him props for that, because he didn't have to. He could have ghosted us. He could have said, whatever. But I give him all the credit in the world, for showing up. And that's awesome. And, I think it's a very big step for, our community to see things like this happen. And, yeah, you're right. Blame tag in circles. It's this whole circle back thing. But, it's interesting. And plus, you guys got to see me without a hat. That's a rarity. So that was my idea of dressing respectable for the senator, not wear a baseball cap. So, but Hero says, yeah, but saying that if they check that box, then oh well, how does it help exactly? Look, the actual logistics of this, the majority of retailers, especially. Oh, thank you, blame tag. It's the background check issue. That's an issue. All right. That's a big, large roadblock to this plan. And it's only going to be certain businesses, unless Dollar Tree started background checking everybody, which they didn't, they're going to wind up going to places that, God, they're going to hate working anyway. Can you imagine being in jail for like 30 years and you get out and your first job with a training wage is going to a dollar store and seeing the bullshit that you put up with there? You walk in, all of a sudden, okay, it's just you and one other person working, and you got people mad, and there's lines and whatnot. I think that would be more discouraging than the training wage, to be honest with you. So, it is what it is. But, Irish, I mean, what's your take? I mean, you've got far more of an economic background than I do.
Look, just from an economic point of view, there is no incentive to do this. The only time that you would take this offer of a training wage is if that you were desperate. I mean, nobody is going to take half the minimum wage in order to get the minimum wage when the minimum wage is already a poverty wage. The problem I see is that this is actually kind of separate to what Jeff was saying, that the market is just screwed. He could have perhaps introduced this at a time that was a bit more advantageous to him. But when you have a market, as you call it, like the buyer's market, where is the incentive to uptake this? I just don't see it.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Did anybody catch when I asked him about what business sectors? Okay, pop quiz. What's the number one source of revenue in the state of Florida?
Tourism.
Right. And what was one of the sectors he named? Tourism and hospitality.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, from my kind of basic understanding of just supply and demand, there needs to be some sort of an incentive. I do think it goes back to that people are just not getting paid what they're worth, even at entry level. Like, there's just no incentive to even to basically live on the breadline and work at a place like you described, like Dollar Tree works. But on top of that, like, today's people that are entering the market are not entering the same market that you and I did, and some others in the chat. There is pretty much no opportunity for wage growth, and many other things that we, whether we may have believed it, whether it happened or not is a different thing. But like, I just cannot see this type of thing working. We didn't get enough time to press him on what other states and how well it's working there. I imagine the outcomes are different for felons versus
There's
teams, you
very
know?
little documentation on that, just to let you know, because
Yeah.
I searched.
Well, so did I. I couldn't find anything, but I suspect that it would be very difficult with felons anyway. I mean, that's a complicated situation to come out of an institution like that and try and kind of live a kind of normal life within a short period of time. But for people entering the labor market, I just can't see this being an incentive. And we never really clarified as well, like, if you did 3 months here, will that carry over to the next job? It doesn't appear to be the case. It seems to be very voluntary and ad hoc. Um, and I don't think my initial reaction was when we first encountered this guy is like, this is wage suppression and this guy is just, I think he's coming from a good place. I just think that it's not going to work. But mostly it's not going to work because retail is the reason we're all talking tonight. Retail is probably the biggest problem in the bloody room because if they got an opportunity to exploit, they will. And
Absolutely.
that is the problem, because even if his intentions were good and it may work for certain situations. He spoke passionately about if you have a good employee, you want to keep a hold of them, you want to make sure. Yeah, I've been in there too, and I've been told to let them go because we didn't have the budget.
Correct. Correct. And that's the whole point. And, if Blaine, think that's a great idea, but, I think when we looked at the donors, I think that pretty much tells us what we need to know on who wants this. But, Hero brought up a point. What about a bill that helps teachers get paid additionally for teaching these third grade reading level adults? True. But, at the same time, we're talking about we're giving them something rather than nothing. It's better than being unemployed. But here's the thing. A living wage is a human right. All right. And so now you're segregating people. You're saying these people aren't worth the living wage. But here's something. No, sir, you can't have steak. But here's bologna. It's not steak, but it's something. And it doesn't make any sense. And I think with the labor market the way it is, and honestly, the underlying thing here may be this. In his mind, he has to encapsulate all sorts of other groups in this, but where he's coming from, in his mind, this may just be for former felons. You just have some other people that are going to fall through the cracks, but the fact that he admitted he knows. I mean, retail's going to exploit it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's going to, and that's the thing that, I think that he misses the point on, and that's why, I said, I was complicit in doing these things because I was told to do these things. Mm-hmm. We don't have a choice, and look, we have said numerous times, my whole thing is employees are more than a controllable expense. Guess what you just did? For 6 months, you made them the controllable expense. And that's going backwards. I mean, it really is.
It is. I think that one thing that he may not realize, because I can only presume that he has not been in retail, like, going to guess that. But a bigger obstacle to getting people who were formerly incarcerated to a normal life, a bigger obstacle than the wage is probably HR.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
they run background checks, and at least over here, some of the background checks come back yes or no. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So do they have a criminal record or don't they? Now, your criminal record could be for having a bag of weed when you were 18, and it could be 30 years later and it'll come back yes. Or it could be murder. I mean, that's not exactly ideal. So, and some companies have this black and white thing of absolutely not. You just, so a big there are more obstacles than the wage to people coming out of incarceration to gaining employment than
I-
you
you
know.
know, I'm wondering if he had to package it this way. Maybe he thought he had no chance in hell of passing any kind of legislation that was specifically for felons. And so he
Well,
had
he
to,
didn't seem to want to talk about teens too much. Yeah, it's possible. I get that from the little bit of research that I was able to do on the guy. It does seem to be uh, felons that is the passion. Getting them back to.
you know, I've got to give credit there. I mean, that's admirable. And I don't,
It is, yeah.
and I don't think, and you know, he I think one of the points he made, and I would think everybody here would agree, if we took retail and all that, if we just look from the reformative aspect, you know, he's probably one of very few people out there that's trying to do something for felons, you know, to my knowledge, especially in the Southeast. So I just wish this was more, you know, if that's your passion and that's what you're really trying to do, it needs to be called for what it is. But the problem is he may not be able to have any backing on that without dumping everything else into it too. And of course, retailers and Disney are going to jump all over that. Boy, you think Disney going to jump all over some training wages for some park help? Oh yeah, you know.
Well, he also I brought up the point about the fact that inflation is more or less completely eradicated any sort of minimum wage floor that there used to be, and I brought up, and it is true, that when I started out, 1 week's wages covered a month's rent for me. Now, granted, I was living in an absolute dump, but you get the idea. You're a teenager,
Right.
but that just doesn't exist. I can't think of a teenager today that can pay rent with a week's wages
No,
anywhere in the Western world.
none.
So that's the world that entry level people are dealing with today. So that's something that he didn't really have an answer for that, and he said government just don't have all the answers. That's true. I'm not blaming government though. I'm not on the government war zone. I'm on the retail war zone. I really do think it's businesses that have crushed the wages for 30 years and have crushed opportunities and have absolutely, they I mean, we did an episode a couple of months back where we looked at the inflation versus the wages versus stock prices, and the stock prices was the one that was just exponentially ridiculous. They were in the thousands of the percent over the same period of time that wages went up like 20. You know, um, so I think that they're the culprits, and that's what I was trying to get him at. There should be some sort. I know you don't like interfering with business; it's a free market and all that, but you did it with Standard Oil. You're probably going to have to do it with Amazon. I'm surprised you haven't done it with some other companies, because otherwise, it's no wonder anti-work on Reddit are so big.
Right. I think as fun, I'm going to tell you guys the questions I did not get to read. And Irish, you can do the same. It's the one thing I wanted to ask was what was his thoughts on some outlets pushing the narrative that he is actively trying to exclude felons, those under the age of 21, and hard to hire employees from the minimum wage hike. And then I had, let's see. Are there any plans or a framework being developed to levy any kind of punishment to companies found abusing the legislation? And if so, what agency, if any, would be responsible for oversight and investigations of allegations of abuse? On the matter of businesses exploiting or abusing the legislation in order to maximize profitability by running a lower payroll expense, there really is no legal way to prevent a business from using this as a continual cost-saving tool and paying a sub-minimum wage for the sake of profitability without further legislation. Correct? So it's and he kind of alluded to when I asked about going to another job that it was, once again, he said it was voluntary. So yes, the possibility is 100% there to go from one training job with some experience and get stuck for another 6 months at another training job. Nothing is stopping that from happening at all. So Was there anything that you wanted to ask Irish that we just didn't have time for?
Well, actually, to be fair to the guy, I prepared a lot tougher questions on the kind of unfounded assumption that guy was a bit. I was just incorrect about it. He really does seem genuine. So I had some tough questions for him, assuming that he was just you know a, a stooge for the big business, but I don't think he is. I do think he's wrong in some of the in his approach, but I think his intentions are at least appear to be genuine. I mean, you know, I I wanted to ask him what he thought that a living wage was, but didn't get an opportunity. But I'm not sure what he would have said about that. Um, and I did want to ask him about youth unemployment in other states, but I think you said there was very little available about that
There's
anyway.
very, very little. And like I
Yeah.
said, the key there though is 21 or under. Well, no, actually, the other states is 20 and younger, and it's 90 consecutive work days. Now, I understand the concept of poker, and I'm going
Mm.
to say 6 months, but I can pull it back. But what happens if it's presented in its current form and it is voted upon and passed? So, I
You know,
mean,
yeah.
and it's, I mean, it's politics. I mean, face it. I mean, and he is right. I mean, it's his last year. He really doesn't have anything, you know, that he doesn't seem like he wanting to put his flag in something and saying, haha, this is my last hurrah as I go out. And I'll be honest with you, he kind of came across as half-hearted to think it would even get passed.
Yeah, he did. And to be when he did make that statement, because I was not aware that there was term limits. When he did point out that, like, he essentially, he can't really be in the pocket of anyone right now because he can't get reelected. I did kind of dampen my powder and just say, okay, that does actually make quite a bit of a difference, because he doesn't really have much to lose. By saying whatever he wanted to say right now. So I do. I would not be surprised if he went on to, in some sort of a consultant role, try to do something with ex felons or whatever. But I do think he needs to brush up on his retail. Um, because sincerely, I mean this. If he is listening back, that there's definitely something to be learned from this podcast about how, if you really do want to make a change from getting people with shady backgrounds into the workforce, the problem is more than likely the big business. It's not the mom and pop shops. I think we're almost a year on the air now. I don't think once ever we've ever had a negative comment about a mom and pop shop. That's not who we're taking the pops at. It's the big business, the big HR departments that throw these obstacles. And how many good employees, Steve, have you lost over the years because you were told to let them go, you didn't have the budget? That's the problem. And it'll be
Well,
exactly the same with accountants.
I told the story last week about having an employee that worked for me for quite a few months, and I was getting ready to make a move and give her keys
Exactly.
because she was great. And I get a phone call, you got to fire her. She's got a record. I'm like, what? You know,
Exactly.
I mean, you know how much that sucks? Not only do you have a person that's doing a great job, they're getting rewarded for it, and all of a sudden their job's gone. She gave me no problems. I mean, no, was never suspected of anything or nothing. There were no red flags with her. I mean, she was about as perfect as you can get. Um, as what you're looking for. I will say this though, if she happens to check this out, I still would like to have Representative Angie Nixon on to get her take on this. Um, I think that would be great to have the opposing view, from direct competition or whatnot. But, it's been enlightening. And the one thing I want to tell everybody that's watching is, this is a pretty big watershed moment for us because, you know, we just had a senator on. It gives us some legitimacy. It shows that we're not clickbaity and we're out here trying to fight the good fight. So I think, that's amazing. And for all you guys who've come along, the ride with us, we appreciate it. And like Hero said, he came across a lot more likable than what we probably all thought. Now, Irish and I had been watching video, so we kind of had an idea what we were getting into. As far as his demeanor, he's an extremely intelligent individual, and after talking to him, yeah, I do believe his heart's in the right place, but just a little misinformed or a little too trusting of big business, because I'm telling you, we all know it, we've all done it, we've all dealt with it. God bless. It's you. I'm sorry. You've got retailers out there right now foaming at the mouth wanting this to go down. I mean, think about it. It's like, oh, I only have to pay people. I'm saving money. That's how they look at it. It's more change in the pocket of the CEOs. And but it's it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out. And honestly, I don't think it'll get voted in. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't think he thinks it's going to get voted in. And, with his history of justice reform and things like that, I can see where he's coming from. And, yes, those poor employees are going to be abused 100%. Yeah. Look at how abused they are now. I mean, it's not going to change. Blame Tag says Amazon will be all over this. Yes, they will. And it's the repeat offenders. I mean, it's the people we all know that are going to do it. And, maybe he's just not, he's not into that segment. He doesn't know. And if he really doesn't know, I mean, he's obviously not naive enough to believe that people won't do it. I think he's hopeful that people won't take advantage of it, but he's fully aware that people will. But I don't think he understands the gravity of how many will do it. And we've all worked for enough companies and seen enough emails and had enough conference calls to know, I'm sure there's a bunch of businesses there just chomping at the bit, ready for this. Like, please pass, please pass, please pass. They're just going to be mad that they can't take their current employees and drop their pay down to training pay. That's going to be the thing that pisses them off. But by God, what better way to get rid of high wage employees? Oh, find something wrong with them, ride them up out the door. I'm going to replace you with 3 $10 an hour people. It's great. So, Hero says, so if you say it's this or go back to selling drugs, which is more likely to pay the rent? That's a very, very good, analogy. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Irish? I mean, you make more money.
Yeah, listen, I actually, I know it was probably said in jest, but I mean, that's how people will think.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, yeah. I mean, Breaking Bad was a good show for a reason.
Well, yeah. And I could see this backfiring and turning, convicted felons back into felons. It's overqualified for the job is now a bad thing in Florida, huh? Yeah, it could be seen that way. Defuck today is right. And this is why full-time is gone. You have to give full-time benefits. Bet no more full-timers. Well, yeah, that's another thing. Imagine you've got 15-hour-a-week part-time trainees for 6 months. Boy, I bet you there'll be a big increase in trainees right around October 1st every year.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Although there's a silver lining in everything, just for a bit of fun. I would like to see some of these Karens try to take on some of these characters. It'd be interesting. I imagine they wouldn't be too partial to to Karens somehow.
This is America. So real quick before we go, I'll tell you what we got coming up. So next Wednesday, it's been confirmed. I just got to get the details ironed out. I'm going to have the president of the National Workplace Bullying Coalition, which is going to be awesome. And, I highly suggest check out their website and see what they got going on. As it stands right now, the very first week of February, I will be dealing with the whole Justice for Evan situation. We'll have a couple of days of content for that. It's kind of interesting. We'll be doing that right now as Kroger is just getting crucified with, the different strikes that are coming, and then the survey that's been all over the news talking about, employees talking about their treatment and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to that. It'll probably be kind of emotional So I just want to warn everybody, if you haven't researched what happened to Evan, I highly recommend that you do. So you're not 100% coming into this blind, because it's going to floor you if you do. You're going to be like, holy shit, that really happened. And then after that, blame tag finally got Scott Sice's attention, or maybe his secretary or something. So we're still pushing on that one. He actually, Scott Sice did a post something about his New Year's resolution was to quit procrastinating, and blame tag swooped in and said, quit procrastinating about being on the retail war zone. And he got a like. So also too, I haven't told you this yet, Irish had an idea for me to reach out to several different people to get them on the show. And one of them was Russell Brand. That's a no-go, but I actually heard from Russell Brand's people, Irish.
Oh.
They actually emailed me back and they said, we really appreciate it. Said, unfortunately, from now and probably the next 6 months, he's got too much, going on to be able to schedule anything, but to please keep in touch.
That would be a very interesting one.
I don't think we could work that out with the time zones, though. I think
it's the same as me.
Is it?
Yeah. He's UK.
Ah, gotcha. So, but anyway, guys, spread the word. January is going to be a banger. It's going very, very well. I like where we're heading. We're going to make sure to continue to take the high road on things. We'll have, individual episodes here and there where it's more like humor and funny and whatnot, but most of stuff we're just. Hero says Irish is telling you to suck it up, Steve. Okay, fine, whatever. But anyway, everybody have a great night. I'm going to go export this. The RSS audio will be up here shortly. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Like I said, I once again want to say I appreciate Senator Brandis coming on. I think that's awesome. Like I said, regardless if you agree to disagree, it's still awesome. He took the time to do this, even though it was like 45 minutes or whatnot. Yeah, I do appreciate it. So, all you guys, take it easy, stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all next week.